So, with the national news so compelling these days, and people holding so strongly to their views, aren't these interesting times we live in? One large issue on the table: should there be an impeachment inquiry on the current president or not? Such a large issue. And how do we use our practice to help hold us and figure out what's right or wise view with this and other large issues? For we know actions follow views, and views are the way we see or perceive things. For simplicity, I'm going to narrow the picture down to two levels: what happens nationally and what happens individually. When I speak of right or wise view, let me back up and review. Buddhism has 4 noble truths. The first is that suffering, or basic dissatisfaction, exists. And in case you don't think you suffer or are dissatisfied, just pause for a moment to check that out. Ask yourself, if there were one thing you could change in your current life, what would that be? And isn't it interesting how fast the answer comes? And usually there's more than one answer. Insecurity for all of us is just beneath the surface. In addition to what came up for you, it's true that everything is impermanent. We stand on shifting sands, and what's more, we're going to die and be separated from everyone and everything we love. What kind of a deal is that? We're going to die because we were born. End of story. The Buddha's teachings are about alleviating and ending human suffering by cultivating wisdom through the Eightfold Path. The first step on the path is right or wise view, how we look at things, how we hold things. This is the teaching we're looking at for assistance tonight. And from the start, it's best to use the phrase wise view, since we often confuse right view with my view, which is the right one. And there's the selfing again. I, me, I'm right. I have the right view. An important Buddhist principle is that there are causes and conditions, a chain of cause and effect that lead up to everything. Like, I can flip the switch and the light comes on. Another example is that there have been many factors leading up to our current climate crisis. We simply don't pay sufficient attention to them. Al Gore talked about this till he was inside out. We simply didn't pay sufficient attention to him. That was our ignorance, our collective unconsciousness. Who wants to make themselves uncomfortable? It's much simpler to stay in denial. We are unconscious individually and collectively. That's called ignorance. It's not that we're stupid, we're being unconscious, being asleep and not conscious, letting things just roll along. There's a helpful story that illustrates this. It's called Upstream, Downstream. It was many years ago that villagers in Downstream recall spotting the first body in the river. Some old-timers remember how Spartan were the facilities and procedures for managing that sort of thing. Sometimes they say it would take hours to pull 10 people from the river, and even then, only a few would survive. Though the number of victims in the river has increased greatly in recent years, the good folks of downstream have responded admirably to the challenge. Their rescue system is clearly second to none. Most people discovered in the swirling waters are reached within 20 minutes, many in less than 10. Only a small number drown each day before help arrives, a big improvement from the way it used to be. Talk to the people of downstream and they'll speak with pride about the new hospital by the edge of the water, the flotilla of rescue boats ready for service at a moment's notice, the comprehensive plans for coordinating all the manpower involved, and the large number of highly trained and dedicated swimmers always ready to risk their lives to save victims from the raging currents. Sure, it cost a lot, said the downstreamers. What else can decent people do except to provide what is necessary when human lives are at stake? Oh, a few people downstream have raised the question now and then, but most folks show little interest in what's happening upstream. It seems there's so much to do to help those in the river that nobody's got the time to check how all those bodies are getting there in the first place. That's the way things are sometimes. So there are causes and conditions, a chain of cause and effect that has led up and continues to lead to our views, individually and collectively. When we start digging all the way back, the base of unwise views is greed, hatred, or ill will and delusion. What holds them in place is our ignorance. We all have greed, hatred, and delusion. To see them more clearly, practice their opposites. Instead of greed, be generous. Instead of hatred and ill will, practice loving kindness toward everyone, not tit for tat. Instead of delusion and ignorance, practice seeing things as they are, not as you'd like them to be. A useful graphic way to remember these three poisons is the circle in the center of Tibetan mandalas. There's the pig that symbolizes ignorance and delusion, biting the tail of the snake, who symbolizes hatred and ill will, who's biting the tail of the rooster, which symbolizes greed, who's biting then the tail of the pig. And round we go. But up in the corner, if you look closely, there's a symbol for a gold symbol for the Buddha, who is pointing his finger at the path out, the Eightfold Path. So in addition to right or wise view, there's intention, right or wise speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. And if you want to learn more about this Eightfold Path, a good website is Access to Insight, which is written by Bhikkhu Bodhi, who's one of the foremost translators of the Buddha's work into English. So the importance of you can't be overemphasized, the Buddha says. There is no factor so responsible for the suffering of living beings as wrong view, and no factor so potent in promoting the good of living beings as right view. And again, in the Anguttara Nikaya, he says, beings are the owners of their actions, the heirs of their actions. They spring from their actions and are bound from their actions and are supported by their actions. Whatever deeds they do, good or bad, of those they shall be heirs. So it's this cause and effect, sometimes called karma, the capacity to produce results corresponding to the ethical quality of the actions. So again, the capacity to produce results corresponding to the ethical quality of the actions. As individuals, one large factor that gets in the way of our seeing clearly is our reactivity. Reactivity comes up fast, and we tend to believe our reactions. I'm angry, I'm shocked, but that's only the first step. Let me give you an example. In a dream, about a week ago, I committed a time and a date to the director of the program I used to teach in, my boss, when I was working. The date and time came, and I didn't show up. I woke up from the dream in a panic. What had I done? Now, one of the interesting things about reactivity is that we tend to run the same pattern. We either get angry at ourselves, at others. We get judgmental. We get shocked. We could talk about it constantly. We get fixed on past and future events. We get a headache or a stomachache. We plot revenge. There's lots of patterns. And there's a great line from the teacher Michelle McDonald. Today, reporting from Baghdad, my mind. A lot of sniping going on and an explosion on the edge of town. In my dream, my reactivity pattern, being hard on myself, came up. How could I have done this? Gone against my word. How good is my word? I'm irresponsible, passive-aggressive, etc., etc. A note here is that our reactivity may be justified, but that's beside the point. I took a breath and backed up to the big three: greed, hatred or ill will, and delusion, and decided my dream was in the hatred and ill will camp. When I landed on that, I was able to give myself loving kindness, some self-compassion. I'm sorry that happened. And with that, Pandora's box opened. It was sad and painful to see the unconscious underpinnings that led to my action about not showing up. And I knew that the next step was also to send loving kindness to the director, to understand him and his conditioning. And I made a beginning at that. I was also grateful this was just a dream. So we practice meditation to get in touch with ourselves, to make our unconscious more conscious, to be aware and see the roots of our own unconsciousness, our own greed and hatred and delusion, and transform them. The Osama bin Ladens hiding in the hills of our own hearts. The most important word, transform. Then we can see and act more clearly. Shantideva said, and this is from a Donald Rothberg lecture, this quote, "This entire world is disturbed with insanity due to the exertions of those who are confused about themselves." This entire world is disturbed with insanity due to the exertions of those who are confused about themselves. So our first task then is to clean up our own confusion. So let's return to sitting for just a moment. And so to continue and to bring this a little further into your own experience, I thought it would be helpful to do a little kind of a poetry contemplation. This is about understanding a Thich Nhat Hanh poem that I think will help illuminate what I've been talking about. So this poem is titled, "Please Call Me by My True Names." Do not say, so just go back into meditation if you wish, close your eyes a bit, you just need to listen now. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow. Even today, I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of the pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. So as we work with this, each of you in your circle here, Speak out the words or the phrases that touch you. And listen deeply to the words shared by others. Speak only the words of the text and let them sink in. Let them find a home in your memory. So let's come back into silence for a minute and soak in these words. Thank you for doing this. This is certainly a difficult poem. Not an easy talk. And sending loving kindness to ourselves and everyone. May I and all beings be able to see things more clearly. May I and all beings be able to open our hearts in pain and in joy. May I and all beings be happy. May I and all beings be healthy and strong of body. May I and all beings be peaceful. May I and all beings be safe, have justice, and may there be peace. Drive gently, and next week we'll have Donald Rothberg. Thank you.